I'm Mike Kelly from the Omaha Project Healing Waters program. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's session where I'll be tying two flies that don't look very much alike, but they are related. The red tag is a simple pattern from England from the 1850s that soon became very popular in Australia and is still used often throughout the world. After that, I will tie a red dart, a modern variation to that fly. So this is the red tag. Very simple fly. It was originally tied as a dry fly, using dry rooster brown hackle. But even at that time, it had red wool for a tail. It didn't take long for it to be probably more popular as a wet fly, and that's how it's tied mostly today. So for the materials, the tail is red wool, and of course I have, this is probably Antron or a similar nylon yarn of today. It's not wool, but it works just as good. For a tail on these, I've also used this fluff at the base of a saddle hackle. It looks like marabou. Tie it in, and then when it gets to at the length that you want it to be, just use your fingernails and just pinch that off and make it a nice fluffy red tail. I've also seen it with red Antron. The body is peacock herl, and you can use the strung peacock herl if you have it. That's usually what I use for bodies for the most part, unless I want it to be real fancy. I'm going to tie it tonight on a size 10 wet fly hook, just so it shows up better. And then I'm going to use a hen hackle, a brown hen hackle. So switch over to the and I'm just using just a standard size 10 wet fly hook. And just a little bit. For thread, I'm just going to use a 140 denier or a 6/0 black thread. And I'm going to start a little bit back from the eye just to kind of keep me honest, so I don't crowd the eye too much. Flip off the tag, and then for the tail, with yarn, it's usually 3-ply, and for size 10, it just seems like 3 plies of this is a little bit too bulky. So you can just tease those away and take one of the plies out. If I was tying probably 14 or smaller, you probably don't want to go much smaller than a 16 since you're using peacock herl. But you could use even 1 ply. I'm going to start that a little ways back from the eye. And wrap it back to the end of the shank, which is, if you let the thread hang, it's right there where the barb starts to come up. It's usually the right proportion. And then just cut that tail at about a little bit past the hook bend. ends up being about the gap of the hook. And then you can just kind of fluff that out a little bit. For the body, I'm going to use 3 strands of peacock herl. I'm going to pull them out of my strung hackle here. There's 2, there's 3. And I'll even up the butt ends here. My light doesn't seem right for some reason. Even up
Mike, your light looks real good.
Okay. All right, even up the butts a little bit, and then just take about almost an inch of those tips and just break them off, because the last inch of those tips are pretty brittle. So I'll just tie those down and then come back to the tie-in point. And then I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So you can kind of see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take that peacock herl and wrap it under from, if you go under from my left to my right, that's the right direction. And I do about, maybe 10 or 15 turns. And then make my thread a little bit longer and then just start to twist it. And that makes a nice peacock chenille. And then the more you wrap it, the tighter that twist gets. And the reason I do that is you really don't need ribbing. This fly originally didn't have ribbing. But the way that thread is twisted through that ribbing, it really holds it down well. So if a fish's tooth was to break any of those herls, it wouldn't come loose. So I can actually let go of that herl and it's not going to come undone because there's so much thread in with that body. So I'm just going to try to get these unwound enough to get, there we are, where I can tie these off. And then I'll snip them out of the way. And then I'm going to take one of these hand hackles. I'm going to take 3 actually. I'll use those for the next fly. And then I'm just going to take it from the tip here and tease some of those out. And then snip that off. So what I end up with is if I put my glasses on, my depth perception would be even better. All right. So I'll cut that into a small triangle, tie it in, a few good wraps. My thread's starting to come apart, so. All right. Then just stroke these back to kind of fold them back so they're all going in the same direction backwards. about 4 wraps. And then I'll cut that hackle out of the way. Form the head. A few more want to come forward there. And I'll cut it loose. Got a couple of crazy ones there. I'll clip those out. And that's a red tag. The red tag was originally designed by Martin Flynn from What's This Here, England, if you know what I'm talking about. Worcestershire, England, in the 1850s as a dry fly for grayling in North Country rivers. Original name was the Worcestershire Gem, and it was also known as the Worcestershire Wonder. But then it just became fondly known as the red tag. Now, tournament angler Lance Egan. Let me change the camera here. Lance Egan, he's a like I said, a professional tournament angler, and he's also with Fly Fish Food in Salt Lake City area. He was fishing a tournament in Italy, and it was grayling, brown, and rainbow, and then they have marble trout over there. They were being caught on prince nymphs and these red tags. And so Lance was trying to get an edge, so he mixed some attributes of both flies and substituted with some new materials. And he ended up with a different kind of fly. He ended up calling it the red dart. So I'm off on my camera here. So what I'm going to use tonight is a 60-degree bent jig hook and a slotted bead. And then the original called for peacock colored ice dub. I have an olive brown. That's what I'm going to use to demonstrate it. And then the tail is red saddle hackle. And then there's a hot spot that he uses a UV pink. So here's a picture of the fly. Switch cameras again. I wish I had a Gretchen here to control my video switching here. So that's a example of the red dart. And if that was a peacock body, you could see how it would have a similarity to the red tag from here back. The white horns on a prince nymph, he replaced with a hot spot of a pink collar, and then a red throat against that bead. So I'll get a jig hook out. And for the slotted bead, I like them a little bit smaller. This is a 7/64 for size 14. And let me zoom out a little bit more here. So find the small hole. And the good thing about slotted beads is it's a lot easier to put the bead on around the barb of the hook. If you're using barbless, it doesn't matter, of course. So for thread, I'm using 140 denier. That's an ultra thread, actually. Start the thread. And then this is a nice webby saddle hackle. I'm going to grab about maybe about 12. You can't see that. About 12 fibers and cut them loose from the stem. And the tips are all lined up. I actually want to make this less than the length of the shank. It's not that long of a tail. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that off right about there. Want it a little bit longer, about like that. And again, I'll wrap that back to the end of the shank. It's a little bit too far. All right. The body is ice dub. And just for a little bit of extra flash, as if the ice dub didn't have enough, he uses a gold wire. So I'm going to take about maybe 6 inches. And then you can just usually break that loose so you don't end up destroying your scissors. And I'll tie that in actually up the length of the body. And then I'll come back to just about the point. I'm going to tease out some of that ice dub out of the package. Dubbing noodle and try to get it to start right back here at the end. Use a little bit more. Bear with me, I lost the bundle of my dubbing there. There it goes. I want to leave a little bit of space there. Maybe come back right there. And then I'll take that wire, and with this fine of a wire, it won't cause too many problems if you reverse wrap. And then hold the thread real tight and worry it off there. Then we'll take a little bit smaller of a hen hackle, same brown hen hackle. Tie it in the same way. Pull the tip away like that, and then snip it off to a small triangle. Use that to tie it in real tight. Fold everything back. Give it a few wraps here. Probably not much more than 3. And then I'll tie that off. Work all these back. Some trapped underneath. Right. So there's the hackle part of it. Then we need a little bit of pink UV. You could use ice dub again for this, but in this small of a space, it just seems more comfortable for me to use a little bit finer dubbing. But this does have some UV stuff in it. There's a big controversy about whether UV actually makes a difference to trout. The way that their eyes are formed. There was a big thing about UV showing up a lot better to trout. But then some other studies have found that once they get just past the par stage, the receptors for the UV light pretty much go away. So I guess there's still more science to learn on that one, whether it actually makes a difference or not. But it sure is a selling point for a lot of people. So I'll just cut some of the shagginess out of that pink hot spot. I'll cut my hackle. I just really think ice dub would really be troublesome on that I think it'd be too bulky on that hot spot for that collar. And there's the red dart. Any questions on either of those?
I don't have
Very
a
nice,
question.
Mike.
I have a suggestion. Because we live upside down here in Australia on the bottom of the earth, I think the fish swim upside down. That's a joke. And
Right.
I use orange bead with my red tag. So for some reason, the trout, even like when you're using a any kind of nymph, orange beads really work. So that orange bead headed red tag.
That sounds interesting. I'm not a big fan of beads anyway. If I really want them to get down, I'll use some split shot. But I mean, that's just, I haven't fished them that much, so I'm not that familiar with them. But it is pretty popular nowadays. Everything's pretty much has to have a bead. We only went a half an hour, so I'll go ahead and do one of those red tags with the tail using that saddle hackle. That's actually how I probably haven't tied them in about 10 years, but that's how I used to tie them a lot. Was couldn't really find the red yarn without tearing apart somebody's art project in the house or something. So I would just use what I had. So if you just take a bunch of this, like the marabou looking stuff at fluff at the bottom of the saddle hackle, cut off like some of that at the base is miscolored and everything. You don't really need that much, but let's go ahead and tie that down as a tail, much longer than what you needed. And then just like with marabou, if you pinch it with your fingernails, you can just tear that stuff loose. It doesn't look that good if you cut it, but if you tear it loose like that, it gives it a more natural looking edge to it. And that makes a real nice tail on them. You could also use gold wire if you wanted. Using that thread the way I do to reinforce the hurl. It really doesn't seem necessary unless you really want that extra flash. But you can crank a lot of these out in a short amount of time once you get the hang of the twisting up that peacock like that. I really like that hen saddle there, or a hen cape. It was from Hairline. Just really like the color of it. It's a real rich brown, like a I don't know what you'd call that color of brown, but it's a nice reddish brown. I really like that, like a real dark ginger. Mahogany, I guess, almost. I really like that on a coachman or any of the flies. A lot of the brown hackle that you buy is furnace or close to furnace, where it has like that black center. So Paul, is this still popular in Australia?
Yeah, especially in Tasmania. The two things in Tasmania they like are the red tag and also an orange bead-headed nymph made from seal's fur.
Really? It's funny how different regions have their favorites.
When you get on the internet and they look at fly for Tasmania, they never show you the orange bead-headed one. It's sort of like a secret. We had a guy from Tasmania come up when I was in Sydney, and he tied the flies, and he wouldn't let us take a picture of the orange beadhead because it was sort of like their go-to fly, orange bead-headed, just with the peacock curl or seal's fur mainly.
Right.
Even with a ribbing, no ribbing, just a. Does it matter how long the soft hackle is?
How long it is?
How long
That's kind of personal preference. I like it about this long on a fly like this. Matter of fact, earlier, that one I showed earlier at the beginning, it was a little bit longer hack.
yeah, that one there, I noticed.
Yeah. It's probably a little heavier too than I would go, but
According to the pattern books and the quote unquote unknown rules, soft tackle is supposed to reach back to the point of the hook. That
back to the
said,
point.
back to the point. That said, there isn't a single one in my personal fly box that I take fishing that doesn't reach the bend of the hook.
Right.
Because I know what attracts the fish, and it's not rules in some pattern book. that
It's
somebody
not
dreamed
rules.
up. It's what the fish like.
Right. So I'm doing like a spider, like a soft hackle, like a North Country, spiders and stuff like that. I'll do easy as long as the maybe a little bit past the bend of the hook, but just barely. Well, it was only 37 minutes and I don't have any more. So I thought this would take a little bit long.
You're going to have to open a fly shop, Mike, and tie your own flies because you're really starting to buzz them out.
Yeah. So other than the one I tied to show you for a demo before we got started, like I said, I hadn't probably tied these in about 10 years. So I was hoping I'd give you guys your money's worth.
I think
Oh,
the
as
red
much as
tag's
I-
pretty much here in Australia, whenever you start tying, that's the first tie or fly you ever tie.
That's about we kind of put together a beginner fly tying class. And I think we started with a woolly worm.
Yeah.
San Juan worm.
San Juan worm. I'm sorry. San Juan worm was first. That's pretty easy and it's effective, And then I think the second one then was a woolly worm, and then woolly booger. And then red tag is about number 5 or 6. So
You can also, if you use you can leave the soft tackle out and just have an orange bead instead of the soft tackle. So you got the red tag, you got the peacock curl, and just an orange bead.
now down there, do you use gold wire or anything, or
Well,
copper
we
wire?
use wire, but I don't buy it from the store. I go to the electrical shop and buy a meter and stuff and cut it loose. I got one here. The red. That's where I go get some of that cable, and you buy enough silver wire to last you a lifetime.
Right, and you can get copper and
Yeah, you get copper and also a video speaker wire is really good for real small copper.
oh yeah, that would be. I had some copper that I got from
You
Trans.
buy a meter of that red stuff and cut it up and give it to all your friends, and you still got more than you need.
Right.
I'll tell you something else you can use that's really good too. If you find somebody's got any old electronics, you can take those motherboards and they've got copper coils on them. And you can
Yeah,
unwrap the copper coils, and that stuff is really good because some of it's lacquered and it's kind of got a red tint to it.
That's where I ran. I was just going to say I took apart some transformers and it got a bunch of copper wire and it had that red lacquer to it, and that started to flake off. And I don't know if it was just age or handling it too much, but like doing pheasant tails and stuff like that, I'd use that. It was about the right diameter.
Yeah.
And I just had some of that red stuff start to flake off.
Mike?
Yeah.
One of the things, at least back when I was first getting started tying flies, two flies that went together all the time was the red tag like this, and then the gray hackle yellow, tied the same way, but with a yellow body and a gray hackle.
Oh, wow. I'll have to look that up.
I haven't heard anybody talk about the gray hackle yellow in the better part of 25 years. I used to use that all the time up on North Platte.
All I can tell you is it caught me a couple of fish this weekend, and I just one of those things that's in my box and I never talk about it. I didn't even think about it until just now.
Yeah. I love that fly. It's a beautiful little fly.
what do you use for the yellow body?
Bigger ones, I use fine chenille, but most of the ones in the sizes 12 and smaller, I use a strand of 4-strand yarn and make it look and wrap it on so it's real nice and flat. So it kind of looks like a cross between the floss and dubbing. But
I think number 17 soft touch BT's blend would be perfect.
oh Jesus, now you're trying to get me to make a big sales pitch here, and I'm not going to do that. But anyhow.
I been tying maybe since about 85, somewhere in there. And really, I don't really know too many flies from the 80s or, any of that time frame. I'm just so fond of just the older patterns. And fishing them, I found that I think, right now you get in these high pressured streams out west, everybody's seeing parachute Adams and zebra midges and, the same thing go by them over and over and over again. And I think you throw an old, like a, even like a, what's that? Just any older wet flies or any older patterns, they don't see them.
Good.
I
So
can tell you, is a rolled wing wet fly is one of my favorite flies. In fact, one of the ones that I demonstrated last year is one of our go-to flies in our fly boxes is a rolled wing wet. We call it the Payette River Special. And it's just basically what you tied tonight with a copper tag rather than the tail. And then everything else is the same, except it's got a rolled peacock or not rolled pheasant tail wing. It's an absolute killer.
you said you have a video for that?
No, it's just one of those. We talked about it, and I think I demonstrated it in one of the fly tying Fridays. I don't remember who was that or it was one of the shows that I was at. I just don't remember whether we've got a video on it or not. But
You said
remind
Payette
me.
special?
Yeah, Payette Special. Yeah.
I'll have to look that up, see if I can find it. I think you mentioned it before and I looked it up and saw it, but then something made it skip my mind. What was that streamer that I tied that had a wet fly that was, I can't remember the name of it. That's what I was trying to think of. It was the wet fly was supposed to represent a yellow Sally.
Oh, the Mormon girl.
Mormon girl. That was it. But that things like the red tag, the halfback nymph, some of those things that, they were popular back in, 60s, 70s, some of them even older. But the fish don't see them anymore.
Alls I can tell you is when you show the fish something that looks similar, but just a little different, you're in Fat City. Because the truth of the matter is, the stuff they live on, they've been living on for the last 1,000 years hasn't changed very much.
Right. That's the thing is the bugs don't change and, but the flies always do. And it's just everybody thinks they have a better idea, but sometimes they work fantastic. Look at the parachute atoms. Look at the,
The purple haze is a classic example of something that came out of nowhere 5,
Yep.
6, 7 years ago. And you know what? It's about ready to go on. It's about ready to see its sunset.
Yep.
Well, I remember back in the